Sir Nicholas Brembre was a wealthy magnate and a chief ally of King Richard II in 14th-century England. He was Lord Mayor of London in 1377, and again from 1383 to 5. Named a worthy and puissant man of the city by Richard Grafton, he became a citizen and grocer of London, and in 1372-3 purchased from the Malmains family the estates of Mereworth, Maplescomb, and West Peckham, in Kent. His ties to Richard ultimately resulted in his downfall, as the anti-Richard Lords Appellant effectively took control of the government and imprisoned, exiled, or executed most of Richard's court. Despite Richard's efforts, Brembre was executed in 1388 for treason at the behest of the Lords Appellant. Becoming mayor, Brembre comes from unknown origins, though he may be related to Sir Thomas Brembre, who served the king from 1347 to 1355. He first appears as an alderman and sheriff of the City of London in 1372, sitting for the ward of Bread Street, in which he resided. The citizens were at this time divided into two factions, the party under John Northampton supporting John of Gaunt and John Wycliffe, while that headed by William Walworth and John Philpot supported the opposition and William Courtenay. On the fall of John of Gaunt and his partisans at the close of Edward III's reign, Adam Stable, the then Lord Mayor, was deposed and replaced by Brembre, who belonged to the opposite party. He took his oath at the Tower on the 29th of March 1377, and was also re-elected for the succeeding year. His proclamatio ex parte. Regis Ricardi in this mayoralty is given in the Cottonian manuscripts. Political disputes. In the Parliament of Gloucester, Thomas of Woodstock, the king's uncle, demanded Brembre's impeachment as mayor for an outrage by a citizen on one of his followers, but the matter was compromised. He now became for several years one of the two collectors of customs for the Port of London, with Geoffrey Chaucer for his controller, his accounts being still preserved. The party to which Brembre belonged had its strength among the greater companies, especially the grocers, then dominant, and the fishmongers, whose monopoly it upheld against the clamours of the populace. It was oligarchical in its aims, striving to deprive the lesser companies of any voice in the city, and was consequently favourable to Richard's policy. At the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, Brembre, with his allies Walworth and Philpot, accompanied the king to Smithfield, and was knighted with them for his services on that occasion. He is mentioned as the king's financial agent in the 21st of December 1381 issues of Exchequer, and as one of the leading merchants summoned, a treater and communer, with Parliament on supplies the 10th of May 1382. His foremost opponent, John Northampton, held the mayoralty for 2 years in succession to Walworth, but at the election of 1383 Brembre, who had been returned to Parliament for the city at the beginning of this year, and who was one of the 16 aldermen then belonging to the Great Grocers Company, over forte main agnt multitude des gens, fuste fait maire. William Stubbs calls attention to this forcible election as possessing the importance of a constitutional episode, but wrongly assigns it to 1386. Charges of corruption and tyranny. On the outbreak of John Northampton's riot in February 1384, Brembre arrested and beheaded a ringleader, John Constantin Cordwainer. Our main knowledge of Brembre's conduct is derived from a bundle of petitions presented to Parliament in October to November 1386 by 10 companies of the rival faction, of which 2 are printed in the Rolls of Parliament, e. 225-7. In these he is accused of tyrannous conduct during his mayoralty of 1383-4. especially of beheading the Cordwainer Constantin for the riot in Cheapside, and of securing his re-election in 1384 by increased violence. Forbidding his opponents to take part in the election, he filled the Guildhall with armed men, who, at their approach, siren zurEux noise, criants tu was lauer pursuivans Hyde Ausmund. In 1386 he secured the election of his accomplice, Nicholas Brembre, who was thus mayor at the time of the petition, so that the mayoralty was still, it urged, tenues par conqueste maestri, while Mayor Brembre had effected the ruin of his rival, John de Northampton, by his favourite device of a charge of treason, and though Thomas of Woodstock, Duke of Gloucester, and the opposition accused him of plotting in favour of Suffolk, who was impeached in the Parliament of 1386, and of compassing the death, he not only escaped for the time, but at the close of the year was, with Simon de Burley and others of the party of resistance, summoned by Richard into his council. Through the year 1387 he supported Richard in London in his struggle for absolute power, but was again accused by Gloucester and the opposition of inciting the mayor and citizens against them, when the former shrank from such a plot, trial and execution. He was therefore among the 5 councillors charged with treason by the Lords Appellant on the 14th of November 1387, and, on the citizens refusing to rise for him, fled, but was captured and imprisoned at Gloucester, until on the 28th of January 1388 he was moved to the Tower. The merciless Parliament met on the 3rd of February, and the 5 councillors were formally impeached by Gloucester and the Lords Appellant. Brembre, who was styled foul ex-chevalier de Londres, and who was hated by York and Gloucester, was specially charged with taking 22 prisoners out of Newgate and beheading them without trial at the Foul Oak in Kent. On the 17th of February he was brought from the Tower to Westminster before Parliament and put on trial. He pleaded guilty of nothing to all charges and claimed trial by battle as a knight, but it was refused. When the king supported him, 305 people in Parliament threw down the gauntlets opposing the king. He was sentenced on the 20th and was ordered to be taken back to the Tower, whence the Marshal should lui traîner parmi les site de Lounders, et avant tanques dits forches, et liox lui pendre par le cou. The hanging was carried into effect, though he had many intercessors among the citizens, but was reversed by Richard in his last struggle. The 25th of March 1399. John Stow in his Annals incorrectly wrote that he was beheaded. He was buried in the choir of the Christ Church Grey Friars.